understand those protocols, what they would be. So what we're seeing now and going forward is going to be a consolidation. And what before was not important, when you look online and see commodity type products where there's 8 or 10 of the same type of items, the companies that have compliance and safe products will be the products left standing. And if you don't have it, you're not going to be able to protect your brand. You're not going to be able to prove your compliance. That'll whittle down the competitors. So there's going to be a thinning out naturally occurring because of the risk that's coming from the government, and because people have never looked at, if you look at a clock and you're looking at the product in the center, if you look at 12 o'clock, it's a regulatory, or Amazon, where 12 o'clock is Amazon, 3 o'clock is regulatory, 9 o'clock could be major retailers, and Europe could be 6 o'clock. Everybody's been looking at 12 o'clock to Amazon only, but disregarding what's necessary for government regulation. So Amazon in the past just sends you a link, go to the CPSC website, look up your products. It's on you as an importer record to bear the burden to exercise due care, and they don't really help you with that. So that's why there's this big disconnect of people, what they talk about compliance, never having to go through that because there's never a formal path for them to go to.
And I mean, that completely makes sense, because I've seen so many clients that have baby products that have been successfully selling those products, even with some compliance in place, like they had to get a child's product certificate, or which is actually just a certificate that as long as your product is tested by an approved lab, you can go to the CPSC website and you can write up your own CPC, citing all the information, and that's what you have to submit to Amazon. And so we had been doing that with our clients for a long time, but recently Amazon now has come back to all of these people with baby products and has said, no more. Now you have these additional things. It's not just you need CPC. Now you need, some people need FDA, some people need all these different requirements. So it's it's very confusing. So is it just baby products that people need to worry about? Who should be concerned with compliance in terms of sellers on Amazon and e-commerce?
Well, you have to look at, going back to the beginning, you look at your products and evaluating risk and risk of injury or misuse. It's a consumer product. So the governments always want to protect the consumer. And in Europe, what's happened, they used to look at the consumer being responsible in the Amazon world for their own compliance. But as we know, people aren't capable of understanding what is required. For children's products, 12 and under, there's a law, CPSC, which people only equate that to testing and or a certificate, but there's other requirements. There's these 1107 requirements, or a periodic test plan, a material change policy, for example, undue influence training. You have to have incident reporting. We offer a whole module that walks you through that critical path of every item that you need, so you don't run afoul just by having a CPC and a test report. And outside of baby products, evaluating your risk by age grading, lead for violations. Certain products are looked at, differently at the ports. So you have to look at your product as far as the risk goes, and you should get you can go to any test lab and say, I want to sell my products here. What are the regulations I need to test for? Prop 65 is a good example for California. On several clients I've talked to are under this, it's going out around Amazon that because you don't have 10 or less employees, you're exempt from Prop 65. When the fact is that Amazon is named as a co-defendant if you're fined for Prop 65, it's environmental law. So these cases, it's kind of legalized extortion. California shares in that fine. So if your product goes to a landfill, it doesn't matter how many, if it leaches certain chemicals, you're responsible for that. And if you're not in a safe harbor, if your products aren't in a predetermined case, class action, you have to either pay a fine, which could be $30,000 to $40,000. So a test may be $60 when you're doing a test for that. It behooves any seller to get that test if you're selling in California to make sure you're compliant with that item.
And I think everyone selling on Amazon does have to meet the Prop 65 requirements, because there's no guarantee your product's not going to be sold in California. So it is kind of I think a blanket requirement. So yeah, I think it's so important to understand these things and to be able to be proactive about it. So speaking of being proactive, what is the easiest way to check if your product, what requirements your product has? So we're just focusing on folks that are selling on Amazon and in e-commerce, maybe in their own website. They're not ready for Walmart and big retail yet. You know, they're just getting started. What's the easiest way? Like, okay, I'm getting ready to sell dental floss, right? I'm going to sell dental floss. What is the easiest way to check? You mentioned a lab. How do I find this lab? Like, what's the steps I should go through when I'm considering selling a product? I've chosen the product, it looks good, I'm about to go source it. What should I do?
So you can look at any accredited, go to the CPSC website, there's a list of accredited laboratories. And depending on your product, you can look online and see for dental floss, you can find the standard. Like in a typical product that has an ASTM standard, for example, you have a physical mechanical part of it, and then you have a chemical component, and you have the regulatory stuff. You go to the website and find out what your standard would be, but then you go to list to the CPSC and find a lab that's accredited for that standard. And there's a list on the CPSC website. Call them up and say, hey, I have these products. I want to sell in the US, Canada, and maybe Europe. And they will give you a quote for telling you what you should test for. So now, keep in mind that they sell tests, so it may be more than you may need, but at least you'll get an understanding of baseline of what your product requires, because things are happening very quickly. It used to be you just had to worry about the federal standards, but for children's products and other items, you have states that there are limits, and counties like in New York that are setting limits that are more stricter than the federal level. So I just saw a thing from Wayfair for clients put out asking sellers by March 27th, if they don't click these 5 items that they can prove that their products don't have these chemicals in there, they're going to be delisted. So the bottom line is you need to know your products. You can't just have a guy who has a guy and gets products and thinks this is easy, I don't need it. Anybody who's going to be in business a long time, it's been successful, takes a passion of what they do and understands the products they're selling. And so you just can't put products up as commodities and think if I get caught, I'm just going to walk away from it. I mean, good sellers are good business people. And if you're going to build a business, you want to build a foundation for your business to last, to protect your wealth, protect your brand. And quality is the inverse of compliance. So if you're selling good quality products, you're going to have less compliance issues. And that's always been true, because in traditional retailers, chargebacks, which used to be Babies R Us or Target, they'll take products back from anybody because they'll give you a refund to spend in a store, but they just charge that retailer back and it throws in the trash, and you get a bill off the money they owe you. So you need to have good zippers if you're doing retails that don't break, because the quality issues are going to be compliance related issues. One of the containers that we're fighting now was released. There was a $90 material change in zippers on a container of bags that had the Chinese zipper versus the US zipper. There's no way of telling. The company didn't have a material change policy for the factory to let them know that they made the change. The CPSC scanned it for lead, found to have lead levels in it 3 times the limit, and they impounded the container. They wouldn't allow me to do a rework product because it wasn't in the products themselves were not compliant. It was just a case that was holding them. And we have a court date ahead of time, but we're going to get the container back. But there's a $105,000 fine on top of it was a $48,000 container, $12,000 of storage charges. It's been 2 months, and the hearing's not till April 5th. So if we get that back, there's a $400,000 swing in monies there for $90 of zippers.
Oh my goodness.
And this could have been taken care of by having an inspection, in COVID, since people can't go to the factories, which they used to go to, having an inspection company have a protocol to test before you leave, so you don't have to worry about that, because you spend $700. And I can tell you, the government just asked for a $55 million increase in port surveillance this year. And the CPSC's budget is only $135 million. So you're going to see containers stopped. That's why we're gearing up with people. We just hired an ex-CPSC person. They're going to be stopping things for CPCs, for lead violations, projectiles, balloons, you name it, because of people not taking care of that. That's the way they're going to throw people at it on the ports.
Right. And if we have a compliance program and we are looking at these things ahead of time and we built it into our inspections and we know what we're supposed to be testing for, we can spend a few $100s
Insurance
to
and
get
sail right
started.
through and not have peace of mind, not worry. I mean,
Yeah. And
I
then
released,
versus being reactive and have, like you just talked about, so much money. So speaking of compliance programs, what should, I mean, we've kind of laid it out, but if we could lay out like brand new, I'm brand new to the CPG industry. I'm just starting my brand. I'm selling on Amazon and my own website. Um, what does it look like for me to put a compliance program in place? What does that mean?
compliance program in virtual companies is different with companies that have interactive people. But first and foremost, you have to name a person in charge of compliance. In the government, if you look at the Justice Department, and I have to say, if you have a compliance program in place, you're looked more favorably if you do get stopped at the border. If your containers are stopped, we were in a process of putting a compliance program in place, and I was able to free up 3 containers based on working with me because of my reputation. They know the work that I'm not going to sign off on them. Keep in mind that if you're stopped by the CPSC for one bad import, you're on a list and they don't give you the algorithm, but you're going to be stopped for the next 5 to 6 times. So if you don't have a compliance program in place, if you ever have had a stoppage, you're on that list. That factory's subsidiaries are on that list. The government knows all the aliases of your factory, that knows how they import products. So if you try door number 1, they try to bring it in door number 2, the government knows those subsidiary companies, and it's just like CIA spy stuff, but they know all those tentacles of those factories that may have Chinese companies, that factories in Vietnam. So they will stop you, and you have to have at least 5 clean imports before you get off. So by building that compliance program, you're putting process in place that ensure that you can start by building it into your vendor guides or into your POs to have, CPSC calls it exercising due care. So you have a responsibility as importer record to put products into this market to consumers. And this will also help you with liability insurance, because having a compliance program is like having driver's training on your insurance. It will show the insurance company that you know what you're doing, and it will lessen your risk to them because you have the process in place and understand what to do versus someone who's just not even following the laws. But you go forward and name that compliance person. Documentation is key. If you're doing children's products, you have a 5-year requirement for documents, everything related to that test reports, design documents. If you're in Canada, it's 6 years. If you're in Europe, there's a 10-year requirement. So you have to understand the documentation requirements, because your IT systems, how you store your files, not just now, but you have to have failover. If you have legacy in 2 or 3 years, switch to another program, you have to account for that, where that documentation is going to be, because you may be asked to produce that information, for liability things may come up in 4 to 5 years. So you have to build that compliance program into how you document, how do you build technical files. So how you build your files is paramount. If you want to sell in Europe, a technical file is required versus the US. And that is more inclusive than what you need for proof of compliance in the United States. So you have to learn how to build your documentation, your interaction with the factories, your corrective action plans, that if you change or design the product and make another iteration, it's important that you keep track of those changes so you can understand that. And most importantly is the material change, having detailed enough tracking down to the batch level. So if you do have one bad product, and we just passed Chinese New Year, but in sewing products in China, traditionally, 60% of the employees just leave their jobs and go find another job somewhere else. So the quality is very bad for the first 3 months after Chinese New Year. That's why there's a rush to get stuff out before it ends. So your incidence of bad products is going to happen like from after that time period. So it's important that you can trace your batches down to the smallest denominator. So if you have tracking labels per batch, so if you had one bad batch, you wouldn't have to recall hundreds or thousands of products. You could say this is one bad container and prove to the government that I have enough detailed documentation to say this risk was only limited to this container.
Bill, that's some great insight. Something else I would love to know is, are there any what are regulators looking for when they flag a shipment? Is it random? Are there things that you can do to kind of preempt getting flagged? I'm super interested to look behind the curtain in terms of what they're looking for.
Well, just like you hear sometimes in the news about sources and methods for the government, they don't disclose that, but I can say traditionally and historically, it's been looking at the ports. We have scanned, we have the X-ray scanners and everything else for radiation. I was just on a call yesterday. Client had radiation in pillows, and it was because of stuffing was recycled, and it showed up as radiation, which is crazy in of itself. But now the CPSC is looking online at Amazon, for example, and looking at classes of products that they deem to be risky. And they'll look at the sellers and they check the manifest, because Customs and Border Patrols, all the government departments work together. So they have the information available to them. So they can have you on the lookout for that. Or if you had a prior and you say you can't switch, you just can't end the company and go start another company because you had a violation, they follow that trail. And you may not think they know that, but they can look at it that way. They can look at it for products on the manifest, paints like yellows and reds and blacks, that inks may have lead in them because of packaging, for example. They have their own ways of looking at it that's different from what you and I would look at that product for.
Interesting.
And it's mostly around risk.
Huh. So in terms of that, there's I feel like not only with Amazon, but with the government regulations, things like that, stuff is changing so quickly. If you're a small mom and pop, somebody who's like moonlighting as an Amazon seller, it's getting harder by the day. How are those types of sellers? How can they keep up with all these changes in regulations and what's needed, what's not needed?
Well, best thing is if you should sell products that you're intimate with and understand what you're selling and take a passion to it, because the most successful people, in the 10 years I've been doing this, the people that are most successful love the products they're selling, know everything about it, and they know what's inside of them. The client the other day asked for, you can't understand chemical compliance unless you know the MSDS. It's like the recipes for food. You have to know which chemicals are in your product. So you have to understand the basic building blocks of what to ask your factories and suppliers, because if you don't set a bar, a threshold for what you're expecting, you're going to get the least. If you set the bar very high, if the factories know you're looking for this is not the first year that they've sold into the U.S. market. So they're going to kind of blend their operations to what you're asking for. So it's better to know what to ask for, but it's also having your selling strategy of where you're going to sell. If you're planning on selling a product and you have a unique product that's not just a commodity that you could end up in retail, you want to develop a protocol for your product so you know where to sell. So when you test efficiently, you don't have to test. Say you have 20, 25 products. You can test on a component level. You can test all the elements and paints, and then test it standard once for put together, and take that testing cost across 20 items. I'm working with a company for the last 4 months that's 2,300 products on Amazon, and we're working on a master protocol for all these products that we can get down to 16 protocols that they can ensure they meet Prop 65 in Europe. They sell in Europe, that they can sell worldwide. And understanding your products will enable you to map out where your sales channels will be, because if you were to go to retail from Amazon, you're going to be in a rude awakening if you've never done any of this. But if you plan for it from the beginning, it's an easy transition, because you just have to tweak a few things. You may have some extra risk. I had mentioned some of the major retailers have quality items like YKK zippers, because they know that zipper is going to break and they don't want to return them back. So they have quality testing as well as compliance testing.
So that's super interesting. The other thing I'm really curious about is, are, air shipments, express shipments, are they treated the same way? Because it seems like the government puts a lot more onus on those carriers to kind of regulate a little bit more. It's almost like they're contracting with them. Do you see the same type of issues with air shipments? And if not, why is that?
Traditionally, the big carriers like FedEx did not want to provide CPCs for each item, but where we're headed is that is going to be a requirement going forward, because that is where the bulk of the products are coming in one by one. They're not being able to be scanned because of the thousands, hundreds of thousands of packages coming in every day. But in meetings I've been with government officials, they're looking at that, because why should someone have a favorable way of bypassing the rules and regulations and laws when everybody else is doing the right thing? So, the level of the playing field, if you sell in Europe, there's a new European surveillance law that went into effect. It goes into effect actually July 16th. But it took the onus from the Amazon is now responsible. But if your product is not compliant in one European country, it will not be sold in any. And so what that means is if you have DOCs or CE markings, you have to understand your products, your technical files have to be built, and you have to have an authorized representative person to represent you in Europe, because they did this law to level the playing field to protect jobs in Europe, because it was devastating. A lot of mom and pop sellers and people from warehouses or people over here were just taking jobs. So now you have to have people in Europe to oversee the compliance related items, but you really have to understand and plan for that. So if you're going to map out where you're going to go, if you know your product route, I mean, having that vision, you're going to be better off by starting from square one, thinking big instead of reacting to the latest person who wants to talk to you.
Right, being proactive. Are certain countries scrutinized more than others? In other words, if are shipments from China treated differently than from the UK or from Brazil or from Vietnam, in the government's eyes?
Not that's published or known. I mean, certain classes of products, you have to understand that the shipping documents and manifest are filed days in advance of shippings. So they have bots and they have scanners looking at items. Things in my experience that can trip that up, or if it's a factory that you don't know anything about, but they've been on that list, you have to ask your suppliers, have you had any stoppages for products in the last year or two? Because if you unknowingly have products while they're on a list selling and being stopped, your products are more likely to be stopped. So that's a big indicator and tell, but they don't discriminate from one country to another. It's more or less types of products on the manifest in advance of the shipping.
So it's mostly AI driven machine learning, which means that those algorithms are just going to get better and better and better, which means that compliance is going to be a necessity moving forward, because those machine learning algorithms, the more data they can crunch on, the more data you unleash on them, the better they're going to get at catching these things.
Well, we're already seeing this. Amazon actually has more AI. The government is always lagging in technology. So the government, unfortunately, it's giving time to people that are getting away with not having compliance right now. But you start to see, like I have a template for Amazon that was provided that's for CPCs that's written for bots to read, which wouldn't have been the norm a couple years ago. But now it's creating data so the bots and artificial AI can read it. So I would imagine that's why you're seeing the crackdown. The Amazon wants to continue to be favorable because they have to walk this fine line of everybody's selling on them, but they can't upset all these governments. So the harmonization, they're working more and more towards aligning with what is needed from a regulatory standpoint.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm a data, software guy. So that's what really interests me a lot is, I'm going to go off kind of on a tangent here, but what people don't realize is, in the next, as little as 5 years, could take 10 years, but so many of these things are going to be picked up by this machine learning. The way that they can, if anybody's looked at some of the machine learning algorithms and played with any of them, I mean, the ability for those machine learning algorithms to to catch things, to learn. Are there in the end, they're going to be better than humans. So it's going to be an amazing sight and also a terrifying sight when a lot of these things come into play. And like you said, it's better to start working on that now rather than later. It's kind of like, importing from China. There's a lot of talk now about, tensions rising with China and Taiwan and things like that, and people sourcing products only in China. If we end up, having some kind of conflict there, you want to talk about, mass interruption of supply chain. It'll be catastrophic, especially for those those sellers who are completely 100% sourcing from China. So that, that's a whole nother, we've done a lot of episodes on that. Getting back to what you're doing in terms of compliance, what are some common mistakes that people make in terms of just the shipments itself? So like made in China on the box, what other things are some common mistakes that sellers are making when they're sending these shipments, when the factories are sending the shipments over to the US?
Well, if you're building a brand and it is for the long run, I mean, having a vendor guide or standardizing the way from product to product, having a company format of the metric and imperial measurements, barcodes, because of stacking, and sometimes use third-party providers with barcodes and labeling on each side of the box. The beginner doesn't really understand. You get fined if the packages and boxes don't arrive in the warehouse the correct way, or they can't find it. They can get lost for weeks, and you have to build your infrastructure from understanding how best to package your products, and look at your products for package testing. In Amazon, if it's shipping its own package, or are you doing drop testing with FedEx and UPS? Amazon has helped spurn this one-day delivery phenomenon, which when I was importing baby products, we had to do cardboard testing structurally. So a stroller could survive 6 hops from California to New York, because there would be 6 FedEx trucks dropping off and handling it. And now with distribution centers, you can send it 2 or 3 and have it closer. There's less wear and tear on that product. You don't need an outer box, for example. So it goes back to understanding your products, how you're going to ship it, what damages, what returns. You may go cheap the first time around and have a ton of returns because the box cardboard is not strong enough and it's being pierced and something's bent or something's broken. So you have to really look at things from literally A to Z on designing your products, your packaging, your labeling requirements to make sure you meet everything. And looking forward, if you're going to sell in North America for packages, if you're going to sell in Canada, you have to have the French and US. And I always tell companies to put Spanish on there also, because a huge market is Spanish speaking. So why not make it ready for the whole continent, have all 3 languages?
Yeah, that's super interesting. And the fact that, like I said, if you're not planning ahead for this stuff, then you're going to be caught flat-footed, right? And the part of the problem is you get these major companies, like Nike, for example, we'll just throw that out there, that have these huge compliance teams, right? But for the mom and pop business, we have so many other things to worry about. It's hard to even keep up with just the basics. So, trying to work this into your day, your week, to try to get this some of this compliance in play, I think is pretty essential. On that note, what if somebody is new on Amazon? They just ordered, an air shipment of 1,000 units of X product. It comes in, they get it, they send half to Amazon, they keep half in their garage, their warehouse, whatever. And then after they send that stuff into Amazon, they go and do a lab test, and they find out that, you said there's lead, in the packaging or in the product. Is there anything that they, as a seller, can you self-report? Would you recall those products immediately from Amazon? I mean, how would you handle that situation?
Well, the great thing with dealing with Amazon is in traditional recalls with major retailers, you used to have the signs in the stores. It was very, the normal rate of recall is like, if you get to 10%, you were lucky. With Amazon, I did a recall with a company that we got stopped at 400. We knew all 400 buyers. So the great thing about Amazon is where everyone went. The bad thing is with Amazon is you don't have that data. You have to report to them this issue to get the data, or go afoul of the regulatory rules. So if the product, if you have also have a 48-hour window, if you're notified of an injury, accident, or death using your product. So that doesn't always result in a recall, but you have that duty report, and you have to have systems in place to understand what that, it's called a 15B report, what you would need to do that. So in that case, I mean, you have product in both. Amazon will always just stop sale of the product. They're still charging you rent. It's not their problem. They have so many thousands of products. This is why it's like getting insurance for driving, and driver's training is the compliance program. You know, you have to understand if you're going to invest and go down this road, you build it from the start. So there's a lot of talk on Amazon now of companies getting their companies ready to sell to other companies. And we've been providing due diligence to companies on both sides, because buyers want to know if they don't have any risk out there. You know, traditionally a government, you come in, when the CPSC comes to your place, they can do a search on your emails or databases for injuries, accidents, for emails. And if they find that you were notified of an issue, but never really paid attention to this, that you're going to get a huge fine, and you could have a civil judgment against you. So it's important that when you have this compliance program in place, you're going to prevent all those issues, down the line.
Yeah, I think it's so important I think we've highlighted this today, that it doesn't have to be super expensive. It doesn't have to be hard. It's kind of like baking in security into software, right? If you do it from the start, it's going to be a lot easier than the headache of doing it later. I went to the CPSC website, the Consumer Product and Safety Commission website, and there is so many resources, as you mentioned, Bill. There are resources for small business. There's a regulatory robot where you can put in your product and find out the information. There's labeling requirements. I'm always getting questions on labels. So I posted that link here in the chat for everyone here, but also we'll post that on the Seller Roundtable website. But the thing is, get out there, you guys, go to that CPSC website. And what about products that are sourced in the US? So I have a product that's made in the US. People shouldn't just assume that just because they're getting it in the US that it's safe, right?
Exactly. You can buy from distributors in the US or importers records, but you still have to prove compliance. So manufactured here or there, you still, if it's a product covered by a standard, whether it's voluntary or know your products, go to the CPSC and regulated products like children's products. You have a window 18 months ahead. You can see what regulations are going to be changing. So people that are looking at, we used to be on 18 standards committees for clients and informing them of where this is heading. If they're selling strollers or baby carriers, certain things are going to be regulated out in 18 months or 12 months. So you don't want to be ordering a whole container of items and you only have 2 months to sell them before they're not allowed to be sold. So this goes back to understanding the products that you're going to get into. Don't look at it as this is an easy sell. If it's easy, that means everybody's doing it. And that means that you're one of 10 people. When you look on Amazon, you see all those products with different prices together right next to each other. Those are the problem type items and subject to a lot of these issues. So you're getting back to data stuff. One thing been working on for 5 years, because I had a precursor in a software business of CPSI ready, but I'm working on a cloud-based compliance program from mom and pops through API connectivity from enterprise ERP systems to bring in data. And I'm hoping to have that later this year, which will encompass and be able to put your data in once and have it bring the APIs from Amazon products right in. So your products data is dynamically put in. You can plug as a dashboard your incident notifications into that dashboard, your testing renewal dates, your documentation for training, your compliance program, escalation, all that information. So it's quite exciting. I've been working on it for 5 years. And because Amazon now is built on the cloud, this is our third iteration of it, because for seller POC, I was building it to the bigger good of the be all end all for enterprise level, but COVID changed everything. So I'm narrowing the scope to make it for Amazon sellers to automate and bring that data available and build it around it. So you put it in once And then all your documentation will be around that data.
Got it. And as far as problems, so we've talked about some scary stories, but we love to tell scary stories here on the Seller Roundtable. So give us your scariest story of an Amazon seller that did not have a compliance program in place, and what happened, and what costs were associated with that.
I have two stories. One was not an Amazon seller, but not having a compliance program in place. And if you've had a warning before, the CPSC literally has no sympathy for you. I mean, they'll just take your container, they'll fine you, and you have no recourse. If you want to show, that you're on the right path, that you've learned and understood, the government, like anyone else, no one likes to see people trying to cut corners to get around the law, because you're selling consumer products at the end of the day, and not checking. We go back to the quality inspections. We had a seller that ordered a whole container of sweaters, and they had 4 arms. And literally, how do we rework it with 2 arms on each side? And because there's no quality inspection set up, there's ordering sight unseen, and literally, what do you do with that? You really can't rework it. I mean, it's trash at that point. So I guess the moral of the story is, if you're better prepared, it's like being, when the policeman stops you, to produce your license and identification and work with them. If you try to get out of it, I mean, they've seen us so much. The way the government is going with this extra budget of 55 million, it's going to get a lot worse. You can see the storm clouds coming. All the ports are going to have enhanced security with technology, which is in the budget. And that 55, I have a letter from the commissioner stating where they want this money to be applied. And it's going to be in pre-checking, much like they do at customs, when they knew who's on each plane. They're going to know which products are using that technology to be better aware of what's coming into the country.
Got it. So love the scary stories. I think that we can see that the costs that are associated with compliance are far less on the proactive side than the reactive side. We're looking at, on the proactive side, we're looking at, maybe a couple $100 by the time we get into, depending on what the product is, I'm sure, some require a lot more testing and stuff than others, but we just have a general product that just has, a few tests that we should test for. We build that into our inspection. We're looking at a few $100s to get that going and ensure smooth sailing through the ports, no problems, and then some of the more, if we have a more complicated product, then it could cost us a little bit more, but then the barriers to entry for other competitors are a little higher. So sometimes it can be worth it in that way. But what about, I'm losing my thing. Oh, products, specific products, Bill, that you would recommend that people avoid? Like, are there any products, you mentioned some of them that are, really competitive, right, with prices all over the place and stuff like that. But in terms of, I'm just getting into this, I'm discovering some niches, are there things that you're like, I would never go into that category because of that?
Right now, lithium batteries, button batteries, with anything, you'll see a lot of toys used to have batteries in them that don't have them anymore, because there's a huge crackdown because of the quality, the explosion, starting fires on shipments and the like. So that anytime we're dealing with children's products, why CPSA is more stringent is because children are held dear to our hearts, and politicians, you don't want to damage children or injure children. So that's why you really have to set the bar very high for children's products. But I'm amazed by people that want to do the least to get by. And at the end of the day, if anybody that's been an Amazon seller has come from a normal company, if you're doing, I have people tell me, because Amazon, I do 7 figures, eight figures on Amazon because it's a boasting type thing. If you were to have a compliance company in any Fortune 5,000, 2,000 company, a compliance manager would cost you $40,000 to $80,000 to $100,000 a year, depending on the complexity of products, where you're selling, if you're selling worldwide. for people to complain about have people that do $1 million, $2 million, $10 million a year saying, I don't want to spend $5,000 to $10,000. And this is a one-time building the program and then spending money to maintain it. You'd have to be an idiot not to look at that. And that's your brand protection. I mean, it doesn't make any sense when you're looking at in the real world of paying someone to stay around there all the time. You're putting a system in place that maps to how you do business. And in this post-COVID world, everything's been disrupted. So people that usually work in offices that had servers and documentation, you really have to build your product now of how you're working today, not how you did a year ago. So taking a look at how you're going to work for the future is most important for document retention, because simple little things like that for how you're backing up your data, that's going to be important going forward.
Bill, I'm interested in sellers that have a really large catalog or one with a lot of diverse products, right? There's a lot of Amazon sellers that will go out and just find products that are trending, or, they'll just, throw out products and see what sticks. I assume that, the compliance process is per product or maybe even per product type. How would that work if they have a very large catalog?
Well, you should, using the labs, lab quote is free from a lab. I mean, so research a product and say, I want to put this type of product. What is the protocol for testing for this? Look at the exposure. What is my risk? Is there a liability insurance? Like with batteries, if exploding batteries, your liability insurance is going to be higher. In traditional retail, when I was importer of Babies R Us and Toys R Us, they set the bar very high. You needed a $10 million coverage with a $10 million rider umbrella policy. Some of the policies are so underfunded that people have this mantra where they have one container in. If it doesn't work, then I'll just get rid of it on eBay and forget about it. And that is changing because the government's trying to prevent you from doing that, because they don't want non-compliant products in the marketplace anywhere. So if you get off of Amazon and start to crack down, eBay is right behind them. They're going to be doing the same things. So having the ability to vet your products, and if you're looking at 100 people, if it's easy and everybody's doing it, how long can that product last if everybody's doing it for the short term? I mean, if you're going to build a product portfolio, just because you can doesn't mean you should. You have the money to do this. Do something that either solves a problem or from a marketing standpoint, you can market your brand of products towards, pet solutions or household safety or whatever. Go along the same theme. You have a better viability if you're catering to mothers, building your brand awareness and not being seen as a commodity, but being as a brand.
Yeah, I was just about to say that's kind of, Amy and I have been talking about that a lot. The last year or more, is that the days of throwing something up on Amazon or eBay, those days are over, because if you can do it just like you said, somebody else will come in behind you, they can do the exact same thing. Where the real value is now, where when people are going to sell their businesses, is when people have 5 maybe 10 products, but they're super specialized, they're laser focused on their industry, they're improving that product or that line of products every single day. And, when you get to it, it's like, I keep telling people about the one thing. It's like the book that I keep rereading over and over again, because I'm one of those people who's got a scatterbrain and has new ideas all the time. So I have to bring myself back to focus. That's where I think that the future is going, especially on places like Amazon.
Well, you can building your list and opting in. If you have a website, which is not just Amazon, you can market and sign up for newsletters. You're building instead of Amazoning, holding all your data, you're building a list of products. Baby products is a good example, where once you get mothers, you follow the child, you sell a product when they're newborn, and then you have a 2-year-old, and when they get to 3, you have, and we can cycle special offers. If you're selling on your own Shopify site, you can reach out and market directly to those people, recurring people, because they know your brand, they're happy with your products. That is a big strategy that's happening right now, because Amazon retains that data and power, and it's their data. So you want to have your own site also to be able to sell or build your brand site, so you maintain that autonomy, and you can build your brand. So you're building your marketing list. If you're very good at that part of your business, then you're collecting that data and you're following that say a mother's buying a product for over 5 years, if you develop your product line, you can offer discounts and market to those same people. And I've seen clients over and over when it comes to Cyber Monday and Christmas in July, you know, the two sales, even their company sites, they offer those, and they're selling containers of products because they're marketing for those dates for return customers.
All right, Bill, we come down to the end, and this is where we love to ask this question at the end because it gives us, you know, a little divergence from the subject matter. But what are you consuming right now in terms of, you know, as an entrepreneur, as somebody who owns your own business, you know, you're always learning new tricks. You're always, you know, trying to, you know, concentrate on a subject. Or it could even be fiction. But what are you into right now in terms of, you know, YouTube, podcasts, books, something like that that people can get into?
Well, unfortunately, I've been so busy building the seller POC. I'm a love technology, and I have behind the screen 5 websites. I'm building API connections between my CRM, between my HubSpot, you know, lead generator, and being able to build technology bridges to my FreshBooks accounting program. So I love technology, and since I'm building software of the future, I spend most of my time, you know, you always stay relevant and know where things are going, but by staying on top of technology. So for the last several months, it's been, you know, a lot of long days, and because I had COVID in the month of February, it set me back a month, but I'm back and glad to be back to work, and everything's great, and looking forward to spring.
Awesome, Bill. Let anybody listening or watching on the live stream, let people know how they can get a hold of you.
You can find us at jacobysolutions.com, and has all the contact information there. But the, you know, working with Amy moving forward with helping her in her building brands, she's identified the need, and if you want to have a business that has lasting power and is built for the future, you know, have to have a compliance component.
Yeah, awesome. All right, Bill, thank you so much. Everybody listening live, if on the various streaming services. If you haven't yet, please join us live in the Zoom call. It's really fun. If you guys stick around after we stop recording and broadcasting, you can ask Bill questions, you can ask Amy or I questions. You get that added bonus of being able to interact with us. If not, you can catch us on the podcast, sellerroundtable.com to subscribe. And if you guys review and rate us, we really, really appreciate that. As usual, 1 p.m. Pacific time, sellerroundtable.com. And we will see you guys next time. Thank you. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.